The silver dollar struck the scarred oak table with the crack of a gunshot, its metallic ring slicing through the saloon's thick atmosphere like a blade through silk. In the sudden, suffocating silence that followed, 23 pairs of eyes turned toward the batwing doors, where a black cowboy stood silhouetted against the Dakota Territory's dying light, his weathered hand still extended from the throw, his dark gaze fixed on the Chinese girl displayed like prized livestock on the makeshift auction block. Rosalie's bare feet pressed against the rough wooden crate, her torn pink chipao, once embroidered with golden phoenixes, that had taken her grandmother 3 months to stitch, now hanging in deliberate tatters around her 19-year-old frame. The silk had been ripped strategically to reveal glimpses of pale skin, feeding the hungry anticipation of miners and cattlemen who leaned forward like wolves scenting blood. But it was the flash of memory that nearly broke her composure. Mei Lin, her younger sister, laughing as she chased fireflies in their father's garden behind the San Francisco boarding house. Jie. Sister Mei Lin had called her 7-year-old voice bright with joy. Catch them with me. That was 6 months ago, before the men came in the night before the screams, before the silence that had haunted Rose's dreams ever since. Rose's fingers found the hidden derringer beneath her torn silk, its cold metal a promise of justice. She wasn't here as a victim. She was here as an instrument of retribution, a federal marshal who had spent 3 months letting these animals think her helpless, while she cataloged their crimes. Tonight, their ledger would be balanced in blood. Josiah Freeman stepped into the lamplight, his spurs ringing funeral bells against the warped floorboards. The sound transported him back 25 years to a similar platform in New Orleans, where Lucy, his sister, his blood, had stood in chains, while white men in fine suits examined her like breeding stock. He'd been 12 then, powerless, watching his sister's eyes find his across the crowd one final time, before she disappeared into the darkness of someone else's greed. Remember? Lucy had mouthed silently, and he'd carried that word like a burning coal in his chest ever since. The scar on his left wrist, invisible now beneath his cotton shirt, still ached on cold mornings, a reminder of the shackles that had once bound him. 20 years of freedom hadn't erased the memory of being property, of being bought and sold like cattle. But they had given him something Lucy never had the power to fight back. Did I hear correctly? Cornelius Whitmore's voice cracked as he mopped his forehead with a stained handkerchief. The auctioneer was a weasel of a man, his pale eyes darting between Josiah and the increasingly restless crowd. You're placing a bid. The name's Josiah Freeman. He said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who'd survived slavery war and the killing fields of the frontier. I own the Triple J Ranch, and I'm bidding $3,000. The number detonated like dynamite. Whiskey glasses shattered on the floor, poker chips scattered across tables, and the very air seemed to vibrate with shock. $3,000 was more than most men earned in a decade of backbreaking labor. That's mighty peculiar, Deputy Marshal Kane drawled from the shadows, his bear-like frame emerging into the lamplight. At 45, Kane had the kind of face that suggested he'd lost more fights than he'd won his star, tarnished like his soul. Boy like you carrying that kind of money makes a man wonder where you might have come by it. The word boy hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Josiah's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. Earned it honest through sweat and blood. Same as any free man. Free man. Kane's laugh was harsh as broken glass. You forget where you are, boy. This here's civilized country. We got laws about uppity folks who don't know their place. Rosalie watched the exchange with predatory interest, her dark eyes cataloging every face, every reaction, every tell that would help her identify the network's full reach. When she spoke, her voice cut through the tension like a blade. Shemafalu. The Chinese words fell like stones into still water. What laws specifically? Kane's head snapped toward her, his face flushing red. You don't talk unless I tell you to talk. Actually, Rose said, switching to English that was more precise than Kane's own territorial statute 247 requires. Shut your mouth. Kane's hand moved to his gun. You're under arrest for theft. 什么盗窃? Rose's voice carried a note of genuine curiosity. What did I steal your intelligence? Because clearly someone took it. The insult hit like a physical blow. Kane's face went purple, his hand closing around his gun butt. You think you're smart, don't you? Think you can mock American law? I think I'm educated, Rose replied calmly. Unlike some people in this room. You're Chinese, Kane spat. You ain't got no right to. Like I was born in San Francisco. Rose interrupted. That makes me more American than you, considering you speak English like a drunk mule. The crowd murmured, half in shock, half in grudging admiration. This slip of a girl was systematically destroying a territorial deputy, and she was doing it with words instead of bullets. She's a spy, Kane said desperately. Chinese agent working for hostile powers. Interesting theory, said a new voice from the back of the room. Evidence. Judge Harrison Blackwood stepped into the light, his presence commanding instant respect. At 65, the circuit judge was a living legend, a man who'd earned his reputation in the fires of the Civil War and the chaos of frontier justice. His steel-gray eyes held the kind of authority that came from making life and death decisions. Your Honor. Whitmore stammered. This is private business. This is a slave auction. Blackwood cut him off. I recognize one when I see it. Kane's desperation was palpable now. Judge, she's got letters, Chinese writing, found them in her hotel room, communications with enemy agents. Rose's expression didn't change, but Josiah caught the slight tightening around her eyes. There was something there, some piece of the puzzle that Kane had stumbled onto. These letters, Blackwood said thoughtfully. You searched her room without a warrant. Had probable cause. Kane replied his story, improvised on the spot. Based on what? Reports of suspicious activity. She was asking questions, taking notes. In Chinese, Kane confirmed, walking into the trap. Rose's smile was sharp as a blade. Deputy Kane, if I were a Chinese spy, why would I write intelligence reports in Chinese characters? Wouldn't that be like hanging a sign saying, enemy agent at work? The logic was devastating. Even Kane seemed to realize how ridiculous he sounded. Spies do crazy things, he said lamely. Indeed they do. Rose agreed. Sometimes they pose as helpless victims to infiltrate criminal organizations. Sometimes they gather evidence while pretending to be merchandise. The words hit like lightning. Every man in the room understood the implication, but none wanted to believe it. You saying you're a spy? Whitmore whispered. I'm saying I'm a federal marshal. Rose replied, producing a star-shaped badge from her torn kipao. Deputy U.S. Marshal Rose Lee, and you're all under arrest. The revelation shattered the room's equilibrium. Men stumbled backward, drinks crashed to the floor, chairs overturned. The girl they'd been preparing to buy like livestock was a federal agent with the power to destroy them all. That's impossible. Kane breathed. Why? Because I'm Chinese, because I'm a woman, because I'm young. Rose's voice carried deadly calm. Which of those factors disqualifies me from federal service? Kane's mouth worked soundlessly. His entire worldview was collapsing in real time. You're lying, he said, finally drawing his gun. But Rose was faster. The Derringer appeared in her hand, like magic, its small barrel trained on Kane's center mass. Federal agents are trained to shoot deputy. Part of the job description. The standoff stretched taut as a hangman's rope. Kane was desperate, cornered, and armed. Rose was calm, prepared, and deadly. Between them lay the wreckage of a criminal enterprise that had thrived in the shadows for too long. Nobody has to die tonight. Rose said quietly. Surrender now, and I'll make sure the prosecutor knows about your cooperation. Kane's laugh was bitter. You know what happens to corrupt lawmen in federal prison? I know what happens to men who shoot federal officers. Rose replied. Your choice. The tension was unbearable. Sweat beaded on Kane's forehead, his gun hand trembling. He was a man on the edge, and everyone knew that men on the edge made fatal mistakes. The explosion came from outside, a thunderous blast that shook the building to its foundations. The front windows erupted inward in a shower of glass and lead as professional gunmen opened fire from the street. Ambush! Josiah shouted, drawing his Colt as bullets whined overhead. Rose rolled off her platform, disappearing behind the bar as chaos erupted. Men dove for cover, screaming as glass and splinters filled the air. Through the smoke and confusion, more explosions rocked the building. Anapanachamir. How many? Judge Blackwood called from behind an overturned table. 8, maybe 10. Josiah replied, returning fire through the shattered windows. Professional work. The attackers were coordinated, disciplined. This wasn't random violence. It was surgical elimination. Someone wanted everyone in this room dead. Pike's men. Rose said, reappearing with a rifle in her hands. I've been expecting them. Who's Pike? Josiah asked. The man who's been impersonating a federal marshal while running this trafficking network. He's been using fake credentials to move freely through the territory. So, another explosion rocked the building closer this time. The attackers had dynamite and they were closing in. We need to move, Rose said. Now. But Kane was already moving, lunging toward Rose with his wounded hand streaming blood. You're still coming with me, he snarled. Josiah's shot took Kane in the shoulder, spinning him around. The deputy crashed into the wall, his gun flying from his grasp. But the building was on fire now, smoke pouring through the broken windows. This way, Rose said, leading them toward a hidden door behind the bar. Basement tunnel. I mapped it weeks ago. They made it to the passage just as the saloon's roof began to collapse. The tunnel was narrow, cramped, filled with the smell of earth and decay. Behind them, they could hear Pike's men searching the burning building. How long have you been planning this? Josiah asked as they crawled through the darkness. 3 months, Rose replied. I let them think I was helpless while I gathered evidence. Names, dates, financial records, enough to bring down the entire network. And your sister? Rose's voice caught. Mei Lin was the first victim I documented. They took her from a railroad camp, sold her to a private buyer. I've been trying to find her ever since. The tunnel emerged in Hutchinson's general store basement. Rose moved through the darkness with practiced ease, leading them toward the back exit. But as they reached the door, it swung open to reveal armed men waiting outside. Evening, Marshal, said a tall, lean man with cold eyes and a federal badge. I'm Marshal Pike. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Rose's hand moved toward her weapon, but Pike's men had them surrounded. What might that be? Evidence of a federal investigation that was never properly authorized. Documents obtained through illegal surveillance. Materials that could compromise ongoing operations. The what operations? Josiah asked. Pike's smile was winter cold. The operation to eliminate Chinese spies operating in American territory. The operation to protect territorial security from foreign infiltration. I'm not a spy, Rose said. Of course you are, Pike replied. Trained agent sent to infiltrate and destabilize our territory. Your credentials are forgeries, your evidence is fabricated. Then arrest me, Rose challenged. Take me to federal court. I'm afraid that's not possible, Pike said. You see, spies don't get trials, they get eliminated. The pretense was dropping. Pike was revealing himself as the criminal he truly was, using the authority of federal law to commit murder. You're not a marshal, Josiah said. I'm whatever I need to be, Pike replied. Today I'm the man cleaning up loose ends. But Rose was studying Pike's men, noting their positions, their weapons, their tells. She was still hunting, even while being hunted. Last chance, Pike said, raising his gun. Hand over the evidence. I have a counteroffer, Rose said. Look behind you. Pike spun, but there was nothing there. In that moment of distraction, Rose moved. Her derringer barked twice, dropping 2 of Pike's men. Josiah's Colt joined the fight at the evening the odds. The gunfight was brief, but savage. Pike's remaining men were professionals, but they were caught off guard by Rose's deception. When the smoke cleared, Pike was on the ground, with a bullet in his chest, his surviving men in custody. Is he dead? Rose asked. Not yet, Josiah replied. But he's not going to make it. Pike's eyes found Rose's face, and something like regret flickered there. You don't know what you've done, he whispered. The network. It's bigger than you think. Tell me, Rose said, kneeling beside him. The syndicate runs everything. Trafficking government contracts, military supplies. They won't stop until you're dead. Who's running it? Pike's smile was weak but genuine. Men with more power than you can imagine. But I'll tell you this, your sister is alive. Rose's breath caught. Mei Lin where? Colorado Territory. Private buyer named Harrison. But it's a trap. They're using her as bait to draw you out. Why tell me this? Because I'm dying, Pike said. And maybe I want to do one decent thing before I go. Pike's eyes closed and his breathing stopped. The corrupt marshal who'd used his position to facilitate human trafficking was dead, but his warning lived on. What now? Josiah asked. Now we go get my sister, Rose said. But first we need to get to my evidence cache, the real one. They made their way through the burning town to the Frontier House Hotel. Rose's room was small, but contained a hidden compartment filled with documentation that would change everything. 3 leather journals detailing the syndicate's operations, financial records, correspondence, even photographs of victims. This is enough to bring down the entire network, Josiah said, examining the evidence. If we can get it to the right people, Rose replied. But Pike was right about one thing the syndicate has reach. We can't trust local law enforcement. Then we go directly to the territorial capital. Find someone clean. First, we need to survive the night. Through the window, they could see armed men positioning themselves around the hotel. The syndicate wasn't finished with them yet. They know we're here, Josiah said. Oh, good, Rose replied, checking her weapons. I'm tired of running. But as they prepared for the final confrontation, Josiah noticed something odd. Old Pete, his ranch foreman, was standing in the alley behind the hotel, apparently watching the syndicate's men. Pete, Josiah called softly. The old cowboy looked up, his weathered face grim. Josiah, thank God you're alive. What are you doing here? I've been tracking you since the ranch burned, Pete said. Figured you might need help. Something in Pete's tone made Josiah uneasy. How did you know where to find us? Pete's expression shifted, becoming guarded. Lucky guess, but Rose was already moving her gun, trained on Pete. He's one of them, she said quietly. He's been feeding information to the syndicate. What? Josiah couldn't believe it. Pete, tell her she's wrong. Pete's shoulders sagged. I can't do that, son, because she ain't wrong. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Pete had been with the Triple J for 15 years, a trusted friend and advisor. The idea that he'd been working for the enemy was almost too much to process. Why? Josiah asked. Because I was scared, Pete said. Scared of being poor, scared of being old and useless. They offered me money, security, a chance to matter. I told myself I was just passing along harmless information. Information that got people killed, Rose said. I know, Pete replied. And I've been living with that knowledge for 2 years. It's been eating me alive. Then help us now, Josiah said. Help us stop them. Pete looked at the syndicate's men surrounding the hotel, then at Josiah and Rose. I can't undo what I've done, but maybe I can make it right. Before anyone could stop him, Pete stepped into the street. Hey, he shouted to the syndicate's men. They're not in the hotel, they're in the church. The lie worked. The armed men began moving toward the church, leaving their positions around the hotel. It was the opening Josiah and Rose needed. Go, Pete said. Get to the livery stable. I'll hold them off as long as I can. Pete, Josiah started. Go, Pete insisted. And Josiah, I'm sorry for everything. They ran through the night, following back alleys and side streets to the livery stable. Behind them, they could hear gunfire as Pete made his final stand against the men he'd once served. Will he make it? Rose asked. I don't know, Josiah replied. But he's buying us time. We need to use it. They reached the stable to find their horses saddled and ready. But as they prepared to mount up, more gunfire erupted from the direction of the hotel. The shooting was intense, but brief, ending with an ominous silence. Pete, Josiah whispered. He died trying to make amends, Rose said. That has to count for something. They rode hard through the night, following game trails and creek beds to avoid the main roads. The syndicate would be hunting them, but the darkness and rough terrain provided cover. Tell me about your sister, Josiah said as they paused to rest the horses. Rose's face tightened. Mei Lin was 17 when they took her. Bright, curious, full of life. She wanted to be a teacher, help other Chinese children learn English and American customs. And now she's been a prisoner for 6 months. God knows what they've done to her, what they've made her endure. We'll find her, Josiah promised. Even if we do, she'll never be the same. The girl I knew is gone forever. They remounted and continued riding, following the creek toward the foothills. The mountains offered shelter, but they also offered isolation. If the syndicate caught them in the high country, there would be no witnesses. Dawn was breaking when they heard the sound of pursuing horses. The syndicate had found their trail, and they were closing fast. How many? Rose asked. Too many, Josiah replied. We need to find defensible ground. They found it in a narrow canyon with steep walls and limited approaches. It was a natural fort, but it could also become a trap if they couldn't hold the entrance. This is where we make our stand, Rose said, dismounting and checking her weapons. The first wave of attackers came at full gallop, expecting to overwhelm them through sheer numbers. But the canyon's narrow entrance forced them to come single file, negating their advantage. Josiah's rifle spoke repeatedly, dropping men and horses in the rocky defile. They're pulling back, Rose called out. Regrouping. For what? Something worse. The second attack came from above. The syndicate's men had climbed the canyon walls, positioning themselves for plunging fire. Bullets ricocheted off the rocks, sending stone chips flying like shrapnel. We can't hold this position, Josiah said, blood streaming from a cut on his cheek. We don't have to, Rose replied. She was scanning the sky, looking for something. Listen. In the distance, they could hear the thunder of approaching horses. A lot of horses coming fast from multiple directions. Federal marshals, Rose said with satisfaction. I sent a telegraph to Denver 3 days ago. Told them to send help if they didn't hear from me. The relief column swept into the canyon like an avenging angel, their guns blazing. The syndicate's men caught between the federal agents, and the canyon walls broke and ran. Those who couldn't run surrendered. "No, Marshal Lee," the lead rider called out. "Marshal Cooper, Denver office. You're a sight for sore eyes." "Marshal Cooper," Rose replied. Perfect timing. "How bad is it?" "Oh, worse than we thought," Rose said, handing him the evidence journals. "The syndicate's reach extends all the way to territorial government. We're going to need a complete federal takeover to clean this up." "And your sister?" "Colorado Territory. Private buyer named Harrison. But it's a trap, they're using her as bait." Cooper nodded grimly. "We'll handle it. But first, we need to secure the territory. Make sure no one else escapes. The cleanup took weeks. One by one, the syndicate's members were arrested and charged. The evidence Rose had gathered was overwhelming financial records, correspondence, testimony from victims and witnesses. The criminal enterprise that had operated in the shadows for years was finally exposed to the light. But the most shocking revelation came during the trials when Marcus Freeman, Josiah's brother, supposedly dead for 5 years, walked into the courtroom to testify for the prosecution. I was one of them. Marcus said, his voice heavy with shame. I helped them move money, launder profits, eliminate problems. I thought I was just surviving, but I was helping them destroy innocent lives. What changed your mind? The prosecutor asked. I saw what they were doing to the victims, Marcus replied. I saw the auctions, the abuse, the casual cruelty. I realized I'd become everything I'd once sworn to fight against. The testimony was devastating, providing inside information that completed the case against the syndicate. But for Josiah, it was also personally crushing. His brother's betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. Why didn't you tell me? Josiah asked during a private moment. Because I was ashamed, Marcus replied. Because I knew what you'd think of me. Because I hoped I could fix things without you ever knowing how far I'd fallen. And now I'm trying to make amends, trying to be the man you always believed I was. The conversation was interrupted by Marshal Cooper, who approached with a telegram. News from Colorado, he said. We found her. Rose's hands trembled as she read the message. Maylin, she's alive, Cooper said. Hurt, traumatized, but alive. Federal agents raided the Harrison Ranch yesterday. They found 23 women being held in captivity. Is she all right? She will be, Cooper replied. But it's going to take time, a lot of time. The reunion took place in a Denver hospital where Mei Lin was recovering from her ordeal. The sisters embraced tearfully, speaking rapidly in Chinese, while doctors looked on with professional detachment. She's been through hell, the doctor told Rose privately. Physical abuse, psychological trauma, malnutrition. But she's strong. She'll recover. How long? Months, maybe years. Trauma like this doesn't heal quickly. Rose nodded, understanding the implications. Mei Lin would need care, protection, patience. The girl she'd known was gone, replaced by someone shaped by unimaginable suffering. I'll take care of her, Rose said. Your work as a federal marshal can wait, Rose interrupted. Family comes first. The decision to leave federal service was painful but necessary. Rose had dedicated her life to law enforcement, but her sister needed her more than the government did. She resigned her commission and arranged for a transfer to a civilian position in California. You're making the right choice, Josiah told her as they prepared to leave Dakota Territory. Am I? Sometimes I wonder if I'm abandoning my duty to other victims. You're not abandoning anyone, Josiah said. You're showing that family matters more than career, that love is stronger than duty. And you? What will you do now? Josiah looked out at the rebuilt Triple J Ranch, the stone buildings standing strong against the Dakota wind. I'll stay here. Keep rebuilding. Keep fighting. Someone needs to make sure this never happens again. The syndicate is broken. This syndicate is broken, Josiah corrected. But the conditions that created it are still here. Poverty, desperation, corruption. Until we change those conditions, there will always be new syndicates. The farewell was emotional, but brief. Rose and Mei Lin boarded the eastbound train, while Josiah and Marcus returned to the ranch. The brothers worked in silence, the weight of recent revelations hanging between them. I'm sorry, Marcus said finally, as they repaired a section of fence. I know, Josiah replied. Can you forgive me? I'm trying, but it's going to take time. I understand. But I want you to know I'm committed to making this right. to being the brother you deserve. Then prove it, Josiah said. Not with words, but with actions. Day by day, year by year. I will, Marcus promised. I'll spend the rest of my life proving it. The work continued through the seasons. The ranch prospered, the cattle multiplied, the land began to heal. More importantly, the community began to heal as well. Other victims came forward sharing their stories and seeking justice. A support network emerged connecting survivors and providing resources for recovery. Josiah ran for territorial legislature that fall, campaigning on a platform of justice and equality. His victory was narrow, but decisive, a sign that the territory was ready for change. What's first on your agenda? Marcus asked on election night. Anti-trafficking legislation, Josiah replied. Federal oversight of territorial law enforcement, resources for victim support, and a constitutional amendment guaranteeing equal protection under the law. Ambitious. Necessary. We can't just punish the criminals, we have to change the system that created them. The legislative battles were fierce, but ultimately successful. The anti-trafficking bill passed with bipartisan support, establishing harsh penalties and federal resources for investigation. The constitutional amendment was more difficult, requiring a 2/3 majority and county ratification. But the memory of the syndicate's crimes was fresh, and public opinion supported reform. Years passed. Josiah served 3 terms in the territorial legislature before being elected to the U.S. Senate. Marcus rebuilt his reputation through steady work and consistent charity. The ranch became a symbol of what could be achieved through honest work and moral courage. Rose married a Chinese-American doctor in San Francisco and raised 3 children while working as a legal advocate for immigrant rights. May Lynn recovered from her trauma and became a teacher, dedicating her life to educating young people about the dangers of exploitation. 20 years after the auction at Murphy's Saloon, Josiah returned to Dusty Creek for the dedication of a memorial to trafficking victims. The saloon had been rebuilt as a community center, and the auction block where Rose had once stood was now a monument to the triumph of justice over oppression. It's been a long journey, Rose said, joining him at the memorial. Her hair was graying now, her face lined with years of advocacy work, but her eyes still held the fire that had driven her to infiltrate the syndicate. Worth it? Josiah asked. Every step, she replied. Every moment of danger, every sacrifice, every difficult decision. All worth it. And May Lynn, she's teaching school in Sacramento, married with 2 children. She's found peace. And you? I'm still fighting. Different battles, same war. The memorial service was attended by hundreds of survivors, families of victims, law enforcement officers, political leaders, and ordinary citizens who understood that freedom required vigilance. The speakers included Territorial Governor Harrison Blackwood, who had overcome his brother's crimes to become a champion of reform. 20 years ago, Blackwood said this territory was controlled by criminals who saw human beings as commodities. Today we have the strongest anti-trafficking laws in the nation. The change didn't happen by accident. It happened because people were willing to risk everything for justice. The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a bronze plaque inscribed with the names of all known victims. At the top was a simple inscription: "In memory of those who were bought and sold like property, and in honor of those who fought to set them free." As the crowd dispersed, Josiah found himself standing alone at the memorial. The bronze plaque reflected the afternoon sun, and for a moment, he could almost see the faces of the victims, young women torn from their families, children sold into servitude, men broken by forced labor. "Lucy," he whispered, thinking of his sister. "I kept my promise. I remembered." The silver dollar was still in his pocket, worn smooth by decades of handling. He pulled it out and looked at it in the fading light, the coin that had started everything, the symbol of his refusal to accept the unacceptable. Should have known you'd still have that, Marcus said, approaching with silver hair and peaceful eyes. It reminds me of what we're fighting for, Josiah said. And what we're fighting against, Marcus added. The temptation to treat people as things to reduce human dignity to profit margins. Any regrets? Every day, Marcus replied. But I've learned that regret without action is just self-pity. The important thing is what you do with the regret. And you think you've done right? I think I've tried. I've used my success to fund schools and hospitals. I've supported anti-trafficking organizations. I've tried to be the brother you deserved. You've been a good brother, Josiah said. Different from what I expected, but good. They stood together in the gathering dusk, two brothers who had found their way back to each other through shared commitment to justice. The memorial was quiet now, but the bronze plaque continued to gleam. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now we go home, Josiah replied. Back to the ranch, back to our lives, back to the work of making the world better. And the coin? Josiah looked at the silver dollar in his hand, then at the memorial, then at his brother. I think it's time to let it go. He walked to the memorial and placed the coin at the base of the bronze plaque. The silver disc caught the last rays of sunlight, gleaming like a promise, like a prayer, like a reminder that sometimes the smallest actions can have the largest consequences. Rest in peace, he whispered to the victims whose names were inscribed on the plaque. You are remembered. You are honored. You are free. The brothers walked away together, leaving the memorial to the gathering darkness. Behind them, the coin remained a silent witness to the power of moral courage and the enduring truth that justice, though sometimes delayed, will ultimately prevail. The revolution had begun with a coin thrown onto a saloon table. It had continued with the courage of individuals who refused to accept injustice. And it would endure as long as there were people willing to stand up and say, "Not on my watch. Not while I still breathe." The coin was silent now, but its message echoed through the years. Human beings are not property. Dignity is not negotiable. Justice is not optional. And sometimes that's all it takes to change the world.